6. Indeed, those who disbelieve, it is all the same for them whether you warn them or do not warn them. They will not believe. 7. God has set a seal upon their hearts and upon their hearing, and over their vision is a veil, and for them is a great punishment. 8. And of the people are some who say, we believe in God in the last day, but they are not believers. 9. They think to deceive God and those who believe, but they deceive not except themselves and perceive it not. 10. In their hearts is disease, so God has increased their disease, and for them is a painful punishment because they habitually use to lie.
Right now. So let's just start with a fundamental question, something to really chew on. Is it possible for a person's mind to become so resistant, so locked down, that it's permanently sealed off from the truth, even when all the evidence is just staring them right in the face?
You know, the answer might just lie where you'd least expect it. An ancient text, specifically the second chapter of the Qur'an, offers this incredibly detailed diagnosis for this exact condition. And what is just fascinating is how closely its descriptions mirror the language of modern science. So let's break it down.
Okay, so the diagnosis, it doesn't begin with ignorance. It begins with a conscious choice, the willful, deliberate rejection of truth. This is the external state. It's the very first visible symptom. This verse is describing a very specific kind of person. See, classical commentators explain this isn't about someone who just hasn't heard the news yet. Oh no, this is about a person who has made a conscious choice, a choice rooted in pure stubbornness and pride. The message has been delivered loud and clear, but they actively, persistently push it away. And at that point, any more warnings, they just don't have any effect. And right here, this is where we find the first really striking modern parallel. In neuropsychology, they call this truth blindness. It's a state where, after you reject a fact over and over and over again, the brain's neural pathways literally train themselves to ignore it. It stops being processed as new information. It pretty much becomes invisible. And that willful rejection, well, it leads to the consequence that's described in the very next verse. The text uses this incredibly powerful metaphor of a sealed heart to describe the result. It's a state of total spiritual and moral blindness.
So this is the core of it, the main parallel. The ancient text calls it a divine sanction, a direct consequence of your own rejection. Modern science calls it cognitive desensitization. It's basically two different languages describing the exact same outcome, a mind that has simply lost its ability to receive a life-changing truth.
You know, this whole sealed heart metaphor just works on so many levels. From a neurological standpoint, you can think of it as selective perception. Our brain literally filters out anything it doesn't want to see. Psychologically, it's kind of like a defense mechanism, right? Shielding our ego. And even biochemically, this chronic resistance can pump up stress hormones like cortisol, which creates this kind of emotional numbness. The result is always the same. Nothing gets in.
So after that outright rejection, something way more complex and maybe even more insidious creeps in. The internal conflict of hypocrisy. Or you could call it wearing the mask of belief. So here, the text introduces us to a new character, the munafiq, or the hypocrite. This is someone whose words are in direct, total conflict with their inner reality. They say all the right things, but their heart just isn't in it. And to be clear, this isn't just someone who has a few doubts. A munafiq is someone whose faith is basically a performance. On the outside, they're saying everything you're supposed to say, but inside, they are driven by doubt or resentment or just plain old self-interest. It's a mask, and it's worn for social or maybe material gain. And again, science gives us a really clear anatomy of this state. The psychological condition is known as cognitive dissonance. You know, that super stressful internal conflict you feel when your actions don't match your beliefs. The motivation? It's often fear or just a desire for acceptance. And neurologically, fMRI scans actually show that lying and pretending activate specific parts of the prefrontal cortex, the parts associated with control and manipulation.
So this isn't just a spiritual thing. The text is describing what modern psychology would probably call moral erosion. A person who lives in this state of prolonged hypocrisy isn't just a little flawed. They are in a state of active mental and moral decline. They're literally losing their own sense of who they are.
And all of this, it brings us to the climax of the diagnosis, that critical moment where the deception turns inward and becomes a self-destructive illness. This verse, wow, it just reveals the central illusion of the hypocrite. They think they're being clever, manipulating everyone, playing both sides of the fence. But the text states, with no ambiguity, that the only person they are truly deceiving is themselves. And they're so deep in that illusion, they don't even see it.
The text describes this as a kind of spiritual suicide, and the scientific parallel here is just chillingly perfect. It's like an autoimmune disorder, where the body's own defense system starts attacking healthy cells because it mistakes them for an enemy. In the exact same way, the hypocrite's deception becomes this terrible, self-inflicted wound.
And finally, the text gives this condition a name. It's not a flaw, it's not a mistake, it is a disease in the heart. And what's worse, it's a progressive disease. The more they lie, the more the condition worsens, fueled entirely by their own choices.
So if you step back, you see this clear, predictable progression. It all starts with a single choice: rejection. That choice plants the seed of the disease. And then, with every new deception, that disease gets fed and watered, until the final outcome is just inevitable: suffering, born from total internal decay. It's a chain reaction, and it's started by one single decision.
So, what's the ultimate takeaway from this whole deep dive? Well, this isn't just some historical commentary. It's presented as a timeless, universal warning about the human condition. For 1,400 years, this text has been describing a psychological process that our modern science is only now beginning to map with things like fMRI scans and clinical terminology. It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
The ultimate warning is this: the most dangerous illness out there isn't physical, it's spiritual. It's a disease of pride, of arrogance, of deception, and it leads to a self-inflicted decay of your own soul.
And that leaves all of us with one final and I think critical question for our own lives. In an age that is just saturated with misinformation, with constant pressure to conform, how do we protect our own integrity? How do we keep our own hearts from becoming sealed?